Good morning, everyone. Dr. Victoria Scribo here, speaking to you from the Seeds of Transformation Healing Center in Wareham, Massachusetts. Today is Saturday, April 16th, and the moon is in Libra. It does shift into Scorpio late tonight, and it is the full moon in Libra day. That occurs, I think, around 2:30 with a 2:36, something like that, p.m. on the east coast of the U.S., so it's not quite full, but it's moving into fullness as I do this. Of course, it's during the day, so we're not going to see it, but we can certainly feel it. And if you were lucky enough to see the moon last night and sit under its rays, you could feel just how powerful this full moon is. Now, of course, this full moon is the halfway point that began of the synodic cycle, or lunation cycle in this case, that began with that new moon in Aries. That new moon in Aries was conjunct Chiron in Aries. Chiron, as we know, is an archetype of the wounded healer. Within the Chiron energy, we see the wound, but we also have the potential for healing the wound. The last time Chiron was in Pisces was in the late 60s, early 70s, and in the 70s. And that was during the time of coming out of the 60s and with all the upheaval and the Vietnam War, sort of revolts around that, sort of a new relationship with war and why we go to war, a lot of lessons learned, perhaps not, but there are people still alive who were a part of both the revolution around that and who fought the war. So we have a living memory, right, of all of this. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. Some people have been born when all they've known is war. I mean, think of being born in Afghanistan in the 80s, or Sarajevo in the 90s, or those born after 9/11. The children have only really known this sort of energy. So we sit here halfway through this lunation cycle to see what sprouted up with the moon in Libra, which incidentally, if you look at the chart, which I don't have here, of course, because I'm in the garden, if you look at the chart, is all alone by itself on one side of the chart, while mostly everything else is opposite that. And then, of course, we have Pluto making a square to the axis of the sun moon. The sun and the moon, the sun in Aries, very potently placed. The sun is in its exaltation in Aries, and the moon in Libra, facing off against each other, bringing awareness around issues of self and others, how we relate to one another. And remember, because this started with the lunation cycle, with the new moon conjunct Aries, we are both seeing the positive expression of a healed Chiron and Aries in the ability to speak your truth of who you are, defining yourself, the right to be, the right to have your own life, the right to be free. We can certainly see that. And also the wound of Aries, the idea of that you have the right to hurt somebody else or take what's theirs, the wounds around war and the wounds around not being able to be who you are. Something outside of yourself is telling you that it's wrong. Now, Pluto as a square sort of stands between these two planets, the sun and the moon. And squares require us to take action, or squares require us to do something, some sort of change. Sometimes it's a change in action, sometimes it's a change in belief. The way this sets up is that the change in action is one of what are we going to do? How are we going to act differently as individuals to build the foundations for our own sense of self and self-worth? But also, how are we going to let go of the old paradigms of how we relate to one another and move in a more peaceful and loving and fair relationship with one another? We're at this point, and while we've been at this point before, I'm not sure we've ever been quite to this level of things. I don't know if it's the what's the word I'm looking for? Our choice is as important as it is right now. I think we are on the cusp of a great shift. In fact, we're not on the cusp, we're in the great shift. And the question is, now that we're in this sort of new world that has emerged from our own understanding of ourselves, and now with Chiron and Aries, the understanding of our actions, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to live differently? How are we going to move forward in a different way? Because the old way is certain death, really, and not just for the people suffering in places like the Ukraine or Yemen or Syria or Africa, or or Native American trying to protect water rights against big oil, or women trying to get the right to their own bodies and being told that they don't have a right to themselves and their decisions and their autonomy. All of this coming up now for us to be aware and for us to take different actions and have a different attitude about this. One of the weird attitudes we have here in the U.S., it seems, is that no matter what happens, we're never going to get gun control. For some reason, they're trying to convince us that will never happen, that we'll never be able to take these semi-automatic weapons off the streets. There's so much energy that needs to happen, and I think that when you fight against something, you strengthen it. And so I think what we need to perhaps realize, and maybe this is part of my full moon realization, is that instead of fighting against something, it's time to embody something. Embody that which you want to see in the world. Be more that way. So if you want to see peace in the world, you need to be more peaceful. If you want to see people helping people in the world, you need to start helping people. You need to help yourself. Make sure your oxygen mask is on, and then go out and help others. Be strong within yourself, aligned within yourself, aligned within your own heart. And we'll have an opportunity and a possibility of great success. So we have had more. It's sun's not out yet. It's still behind clouds this morning, and it's pretty early, although not anywhere near as early as when Ona gets up. But but we do have some more tulips coming up. And when they open up today, if I can get a nice picture of them, I'll put them up on the community page. I just want to share the beauty and the joy of life from the perspective here of the Seeds of Transformation. We are growing and evolving together. And it's been, for me anyway, a very, very difficult and challenging week or so. I mean, it's all challenging, so it's kind of silly to just point that one out. But emotionally and physically, I felt very tired, weary of the old ways. And what enlivens me and makes me feel good today is that last night I sat under the rays of that full moon, that beautiful moon sitting up there in Libra, connecting heaven and earth, the earth beneath my feet and the beautiful sky above my head. We can change this in a moment, guys. We can change this in a minute, a moment. As soon as we change the idea that it's possible. It is possible. We can have peace. There can be peace in the Ukraine. There can be peace in Yemen. This is a time when we really have to come to terms, not with what needs to be done, but what has been done and how that needs to change. And that includes countries like the United States backing the war in Yemen. It having people be held responsible for their actions just because they're the leader. They get away with it. I mean, Pol Pot died when he was like 90. And he was, wasn't it Pol Pot, the guy from Laos? How many people died? The Khmer Rouge, all that stuff. I mean, genocide in Rwanda, the Armenian genocide. They didn't even call it a genocide. Turkey refuses to call it a genocide. They took people and just sent them into the desert to die. Just like what they're doing to the Ukrainians. It's an old story. And it's just a story that's needs an end. But we have to believe that it can come to an end. And we have to see the end. And we have to picture the end of that. And we have to visualize the world anew. And then we'll be able to work towards that. Without the image in our minds, it's hard to just do something without having some sort of plan or image. If not a plan, certainly an image. So, powerful times, and don't forget to connect. And incidentally, which is very interesting to me, the time that this is all happening, right? This full moon, everything that's happening right around Easter, the time of rebirth, the time when Jesus the Christ showed us the way to be reborn into the new life. The Christ consciousness resides within our own heart, folks. That's where we connect with Jesus the Christ, or Jesus the Savior, or however you want to call him. Jeshua, whatever, I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. It's love, it's connection, it's remembrance that we are not separate, and that we are here to rise up, to ascend. And we're doing that, even though looking around, we're not so sure sometimes. All right, guys, have yourself a great day. Like, subscribe. I'll be putting out the astrology of the upcoming week, probably later today or by the latest tomorrow. And thank you all for all your support, for watching this channel, for giving me your time every morning, so I can share what I know and share what I love which in part is the astrology and the philosophy and all that. But I also love sharing my garden. So the bleeding hearts are getting bigger here. If you can see them, they're starting to pop out a little bit more. There they are. So sweet. This is where Boo and Gretchen are, right under this bed. This bed shaped as a heart. A remembrance of faithful love. Okay, guys, take care. Much love. Namaste.